I felt like we were all part of a pack, and then we all kind of got dispersed, and now we're out on our own, and we were essentially lone wolves.
The hardest conversation is the conversation you're not willing to have because you just internalize it and you make it into something it's not.
I was like doing copy for J. Crew, the men's catalog, like Casual Fridays never look so good. Like I wrote that shit.
Most people would get less time for murder. Hey everyone, and welcome back to 12 Steps to Success. This week, I'm joined by Lauren Blitzer-Wright, someone who spent the last 15 plus years in the music industry, but whose story starts well before that. We actually met through a community of music industry people called the Lone Wolves, which is fitting because this episode really is about community, what it gives us, and what happens when you realize you've been relying on one room for connection and identity. We also get into the idea of control, the way we try to micromanage outcomes to feel safe, and what changes when you loosen your grip and actually let life happen. There are some big themes in here around belonging, vulnerability, mentorship, and why most of us are one honest conversation away from feeling less alone. We also touch on LGBTQ plus family and rights, and what it can look like, practically and emotionally, to build safety for your kids in a world that doesn't always make that easy. All right, let's go. I am really happy to be able to welcome this week's guest onto the show. It's a person who has spent nearly as long as me in the music industry, which is a long time, and most people would get less time for murder. But we met through this incredible community of music industry professionals called the Lone Wolves. And this is a bit of a giveaway. This episode is very much focused on the idea of community and the importance of it. And so without further ado, I would love to welcome the incredible Lauren Blitzer-Wright onto the show.
Boy, that was such a nice introduction. Thank you so much. And prior to you hitting the start button, I feel like when you said I've looked at your past and it really is about community, it made me think for the 5 seconds that I had before we started this, that you are right. And I could actually share some stories with you. And yes, I've been in the music industry for over 15 years, and that's like half of my career life. I had a whole life before that too. So I'm turning 45 and I'm like, okay, you've lived. But
welcome
yeah,
to 45, by the way. Welcome to 45 because it is a great age. I have been embracing the joy of 45 when I turned it in November. It's great.
You're an 1980 baby then. Yeah. I'm an 81. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be in May.
45, rub it in. But I'm older. Okay, I get it.
We're both from the 80s. Like, you're very much just from the beginning. You know, there's a whole generation of us. They're called Zennials. They named us a new generation because they were like, you don't fit in anywhere. Like, from 1978 to 1982 or 84, we are Zennials because we do not make sense to anything else.
And I appreciate that as well, because I could have told you a long time before they created a new word for us that we didn't fit in anywhere. But I would like first to start with a question that I start every episode with, and it's very much a Britishism. What's your name and where'd you come from?
My name is Lauren Blitzer-Wright, and I've been born and raised in New York, not like the outskirts of New York, like in Manhattan. I grew up on 90th Street. I was born at Mount Sinai. I live now in Gramercy. Like, I went to NYU. Like, sounds crazy, but I am like the most dedicated native New Yorker you'll ever meet and have remained there.
Have you ever lived anywhere other than New York?
I studied abroad in London. I lived in Dumbo,
which is practically a completely different country.
Right. So basically, I got my passport and lived in Dumbo for like 2 years. But it just, you know what, my sister's here and her kids and my parents and my aunt, and nobody was from here originally, but my parents met here. They're from New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and everyone kind of settled here. So where would I go? You know, it's like, it's with kids, it takes a village. So I'm like, we are here.
Yeah.
And we need all the help.
I feel like that's a really ballsy move as well, because most people, or maybe it's just people like in LA, when they have kids, they're like, this isn't a place I can raise kids. I feel like a lot of people say that about New York, but you are like ingrained in it. You have twin boys. Like, you are living the dream.
It. Listen, by the time I got to college, I was like, you guys, I had been to the Tunnel, to Limelight, to all the clubs. In my high school days, yes, I know, like bringing you back. And by the time I got to college, I was like ready to cozy down with a cup of chamomile and read a book at night. And they were like, let's do cake, whatever. And I'm like, no thanks. I've seen people do like lines off of each other in a bathroom. Like I was just, you see a lot, but I was always afraid that if I did drugs and died, my parents would kill me. I know that doesn't make any sense, but I was like, I
It
can't.
kind of does.
I was just like I didn't want to hang that way. So I survived it. I'm really street smart and I think my kids will be okay too.
So I know this is a probing question, but so you went to the tunnel and limelight and you didn't do drugs?
I did not.
That is
it's crazy.
impressive.
My friends were doing a lot of ecstasy and I just like, I don't know. I think being like a neurotic Jewish person, I was like, something's going to happen to me. Like I'm going to like, so that worked in my advantage.
Yeah, I also love the fact that you have so much Jewish guilt. You're like, if I die, they will kill me.
Be dead anyway. But I felt like that would be such a disappointment to like, your parents like don't do drugs. And even at the time, like when we were younger and drugs were happening, like they weren't laced with fentanyl. They were not, it wasn't as scary as other time, like what we're dealing with now. But I still was like, I'm very afraid of what could happen. So I've always been like mainly in control of myself.
That's fair. I wish I had that level of fear, but then, if I hadn't had that level of fear, I wouldn't be able to say I'm nearly 5 years sober now. So it took me that journey to get there.
You're here. You're doing it.
Exactly. My mum's not ashamed of me because I'm still alive.
You didn't die. That is the goal.
It really is the goal. And so if being brought up in New York, that has to have given you some very formative memories as a child. What was it like growing up in New York as like a really small kid?
You know what's so funny? I don't remember much. I remember like checkered taxis, which are very much like the taxis in London right now where the seats come down on the other side. I just remember like very specific places that no longer exist. Like there was a Woolworths on 86th Street that doesn't exist anymore, where all the movie theaters were. Like we would drive to my grandma's house in Bayonne, New Jersey and have to go through the Holland Tunnel. And my dad would basically be like, duck, because it was a bad neighborhood to go through the meatpacking district. I remember when you didn't go, it was basically prostitutes everywhere. Like you didn't go downtown. Like we had a friend who had a brownstone in the Village and it was like, whoa. And now, of course, it's like, wow, great investment. But, like we just all sort of stayed. I grew up on the Upper East Side. And my high school was on the Upper West Side. So that area felt very familiar and safe to me. But in the 80s, it really like New York was not super safe. We actually got mugged. My mom, my sister and I, when we lived on 36th Street that was the first apartment I remember. I was probably 3 or 4 years old and somebody was following us home. And I think my mom's also very street smart. She remembered. She was like very aware that somebody was behind us and my dad was traveling. She took off her wedding ring and a band and her watch, put it in her purse. And then the guy ended up coming in from behind us. Our doorman was like off for like 10 minutes. He broke the glass, came into the front door and then held the elevator open with a gun. I remember this. Like totally, she was pushing us behind her in the corner. And she basically, she put the jewelry in her pocket because she gave him her purse with the wallet and everything, but she had her jewelry in her pockets. And then he ended up like leaving. The cops were called. They were in our apartment. I was offering them like Chinese food leftovers. I was like, do you want a fortune cookie? Very lighthearted moment, but that kind of stuck with me. Like it was pretty, the first time you hear about that stuff in the 80s and it happened. We're fine, but like we were held up.
A while back, I was watching the Basquiat film that was set in downtown New York in the early 80s and seeing these like wastelands of derelict housing. Yeah. It wasn't the New York that I remember at all. And, I first went to New York like the late 90s and
the late
even
90s.
Then,
okay.
Then it was completely different. And so it felt like this completely alien landscape. And so it really did feel edgy and kind of scary. But you lived that.
But I will say, I think it like started my idea of community and togetherness. So the Mexican restaurant that we used to go to on 86th Street forever. Maria owns it. Her husband, he died. We did a whole thing for him. Like there was still so much. You walk into any place that you go into regularly in New York and they know your name, they know your order. I think people get confused about like the vastness of the city and how impersonal maybe it feels when you're visiting. But when you live there, you can't even imagine. There's so many people that are like creatures of habit that they go to the same coffee place and they will remember you.
Yeah.
They do. And they remember your order.
Yeah, my best friend lives in New York as well, and she's in the East Village now. And every time I see her and we go somewhere, everybody knows her by name. Everybody. Especially when we go to bars and I'm just like, are you sure you're not an alcoholic? Like, seriously? And she's like, no, this is just my usual.
Yeah.
And it's really nice, that sense of community, because it is, one of the things that people always leverage against LA is how kind of distant people can be and how very surface everyone is. That hasn't been my experience, but there are definitely parts of LA where that is very, very true. And making LA successful is solely dependent on finding your people and building that
Yes.
sense of community around it. And I feel like New York has just, it's overcome so much over the years
Mhm.
that it's really brought people together. Because even with COVID, all of the stories coming out of New York in that first wave were horrendous. It was horrifying to see just how devastating an effect it was having on the city, but also in a weird way, how it really brought that sense of community even closer together. So, in terms of when you were growing up, then, so you had these experiences of kind of seeing community around you, but what was your childhood like in terms of, did you have a creative childhood? How were your parents in the family dynamic? What were they kind of supporting you in your dreams of wanting to do?
That's so funny. They were, like, the best. Even when I went to college, they're like, "Just major in whatever you love." It wasn't this pressure to do anything that was, like, practical, which maybe I wish it was because I was an art history major and that went nowhere. But I loved it, and I loved, we it was an incredibly creative upbringing. My dad is still has a boutique M&A firm. He's an investment banker. My mom was a retired teacher. And my mom is like the epitome of let's take advantage of living in the city. We went to every Broadway show when I was younger, the ballet, the opera, every museum. While yes, it was torture when I was like 5, my sister and I know, like we would buy the cassette of Les Mis or Who or like Gypsy, and we would listen to it before we went to the show so that we knew every word of the musical going into it, and then proceeded to then sing it at the top of our lungs. Like that was a big part of my childhood, was these cultural opportunities that New York is known for. We really took advantage of.
That's
It was awesome.
incredible. I remember going to musicals with my mum when I was growing up as well, me, my mum, and my sister. And for me, one of the most kind of pivotal memories of my childhood was going to
Hmm.
see Miss Saigon in the West End in London and seeing like the original run of Miss Saigon and seeing like the helicopter getting lowered down onto the stage
Yes.
and there's like fans blowing air into everybody. And I was like, this is another world and it is
Yes.
magical. I think I really feel for kids that don't have the opportunity to go to things like that, but B, also that show no interest in wanting to go to stuff like that. Because for
Well,
me, those really shaped who I was as a kid and helped me kind of like find that path forwards.
for
But when
sure.
it's on your doorstep like that, like the options are limitless. Do you do the same with your kids now?
Yes
I mean, you
and
have boys.
no. It's so funny. We went to see Oliver in London this summer because they did the show at school and they loved it. And then we're going to take them to see Stranger Things because, of course, I watched it with this great show. But yeah, you know what? They have ADHD. I did too, undiagnosed until later in life, but it's hard for them to sit. So we do the things that like we feel they would be interested in. I think that my sister and I were like genuinely, we didn't want to be in musical theater, but like I, even at a young age, like when the actors got standing ovations, I would cry. I still do. I get like very
Oh,
emotional because I feel the joy that it feels for them to get appreciated and the contribution they're making to culture and art. It just like the whole experience just gives me goosebumps. It's like we need this so much. We need this diversity. We need storytelling in different ways.
and so were you ever a musical theatre person? Did you get on stage? Did you tread the boards?
Listen, I love to sing actually, and my wife, who's a professional singer, like says I have a pretty good voice. So like I will
Not that
all
she's
day.
biased in any way or
When
prone to lying to
she
you.
said, "I swear to God, if you were tone deaf, this would be a problem." Like, she's like, "I don't understand." So I believe her in this, but my sister and I both sang in high school and middle school and high school and into college, and we would like do like harmonize like we would play parts, but no desire to be on the stage, like none of it, but very much enjoyed participating and singing it in car rides, even like in college and beyond. We have children now, all of us do, and we still will like go off and like be singing. And Shelly, my wife, did not have the same experience. She was in country music and very focused on that. So I'll be singing something and she's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "It's like the main song from Gypsy." Like, come on. That's why I have so many gay male friends. But Gypsy is my favorite show.
But this is the thing for me with music in general, is like music builds that sense of community and that bond in the same way that like sports teams do. It's just there's something that brings people together with that sense of like we're all the same and it doesn't matter because we can talk about this and we can be passionate about it.
Totally. Yep.
Was that the foundation for you kind of wanting to get into music, even though you started in kind of print media?
Yeah, it was never like I admire the Gen Zers coming in now and they're like, I studied music marketing and I'm doing this and cut. And I was like, wow, you are very focused at a very young age. I was like, I want to be an archaeologist. Okay, that didn't work out because you have to take another language to get your master's in fine arts. And I'm bad at second languages. So I was like, forget it, we're not doing this. It's obviously not a huge passion. I think that my way into music was sort of indirect. I started off at Teen Vogue magazine, and then I actually wrote a book with Simon and Schuster called Same
I
Sex in the City.
want to get onto this because some of the
Yeah.
reviews that I've read of said book, I was just like, this is again, not to kind of like rehash the issue, but like this was the first time that so many people reading that book saw themselves presented in media that wasn't in a stereotypical view. So I have like many, many questions about the book. So yeah, we will get onto that for sure.
And it was like a long time ago. It was like 20 years ago, I think.
2006.
Shit, it was 20 years ago. That's
Yeah.
right. It feels like a lifetime ago, to be honest. But yeah, so I wrote that book after Teen Vogue magazine. And then I was like doing copy for J. Crew, the men's catalog. Like Casual Fridays never looked so good. Like I wrote that shit. Like, so that was what I did for like a year. And then I was like very inspired by writing the book. Again, the community, the LGBT community that was kind of standing beside and next to me in representing basically like a type of lesbian that wasn't being represented. So when I did the book tour, it felt to me like I had a say in the community and it was positive. And what can I do to like continue that? So I worked at GLSEN, which is the Gay Lesbian Straight Education Network. It's a nonprofit. And I did fundraising for them in special events. So corporate fundraising, individual and special events. And I loved it because there was a mission and I could remove myself from that because I was never bullied in school. I did not deal with a lot of the stuff that the kids were dealing with. There was no GSA at my school and I was not out because in that generation, it's like something didn't cross my mind, but it just wasn't this thing I wasn't struggling with until I realized I'm gay. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gay. I had a very like sort of easy self-realization, but a harder time with my family that took a minute to, kind of land. But going into GLSEN, I felt like I had a responsibility. If people were listening to me, can I make an impact? So I did that for some time. And then met Shelly, we got married, and I was like, I think I need to make more money. Like, it was kind of one of those things where, like, I transitioned from being the person working in the nonprofit to being the person giving to the nonprofit. So it's like, because we were going to have kids and New York's expensive. So I was actually connected with somebody in the music industry that worked at Sony, and Shelly was always in Universal, so it had nothing to do with the fact that we were together. But I met with HR and they were just like, really interested in somebody that didn't have a music background necessarily. I had more of like a brand background. So when Red Distribution was a thing, it no longer is. That's a position that I ended up going for and getting. And it really, it was not thought out. I wasn't like, I need to crack this industry. It's one of those times where I do look back and think, you know what? Not trying to control everything actually puts things in the right place. Like, I really didn't try to control that. I wasn't like super anxious about it. I kind of went with the flow. I was also like 30, so it feels a little bit easier to do that. And I kind of just let things work out, and they did. And I've been trying to do that more. It's difficult, but like it worked out. And I was in the music industry, and I knew from the time that I started there that I was probably going to die in the music industry. And it might be in the next year, but I'm just kidding.
I really hope not. That would be terrible. And so,
I'm fine.
The whole thing with kind of just finding yourself in the industry, I always think is really interesting because I was a precocious 12-year-old who was like, I'm going to work in music, even before I knew that was a career path. Like, I was like, this is going to happen. And
I
so
love that.
it was, for me, there was never a question about it. But when you talk about that kind of like letting go of the need to control and kind of allowing things to take shape as they're meant to take shape, that is definitely something I have struggled with over the years because, even in recovery, I always joke that mine was a disease of control, like very much so. It's like trying to hold on to every outcome and make sure it was exactly what it needed to be. And that gave me this kind of sense of stability and security. But actually what it was really doing was holding me back from everything else that I could have experienced. And it's only now in my mid-40s that I'm so comfortable with just being like, okay, that didn't go how I specifically wanted it to go. And that's okay because I'm still here. I'm still moving forwards. Things are still interesting. Life is fun. And it's more fun when you're not trying to like micromanage the outcome.
Absolutely. And then you're like, instead of spending all this time trying to micromanage the outcome, you're actually being present
Yeah.
and you're there and you're having that. By the way, it's so hard to do. This is not a thing that you and I are tackling. Like, I think most people want to control the outcome in most situations, and it's more comfortable that way.
So have you always been able to have open conversations with people in a way that is kind of discovering new things about the pair of you?
Yeah, I think I was always like that. Like, I was friends with all my teachers in high school. Like, I just had a different, like, level of social intelligence that most teenagers didn't, and I was interested in people beyond, like, what teenagers are interested in, I guess. But my father I take after him in this way. He has built an entire career based on relationships and connection. He'll meet somebody on a plane and next thing you know, they're like doing a deal together. Like, but in genuine way, like he genuinely is so interested that my sister is a PhD in clinical psychology. I'm in the music business. He will send us articles on the things that we're working on. He learns about them. He watched the Grammys. He was like, I saw Bruno Mars. Like, it's just like I get that from him. And it's not just about sharing and communicating. It's also about like, how can I help? And I, of course, want to help the world because it's a shitstorm. But like my first instinct is to figure out like how, especially when I was at Sony, for the younger people, they're like, how can I help? How can I help you have a better experience? Or how can I guide you? How can I mentor you? And I think that is like a nurturing thing. And it's also a connecting thing. As I get older, I think it's turned into that. But throughout the course of my life, I've always I don't know. It's not like a weird no boundary thing. It's just like a curious about people. And like, it feels really good to connect with people.
Curiosity is something that I think a lot of people are scared of because in order to be
Yeah.
curious, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And
Mm.
it's not a skill that comes naturally to everyone, but it is a skill that can be learned. And so in terms of how this showed up when you were in the workplace, you talk about showing up for people and kind of asking how you can be of use to them and kind of what kind of development they're looking for. Did that stem from either a positive or a negative experience in your work history where there was someone who either kind of really supported your growth and lifted you up, or you saw how they were that was to the negative and you were like, I won't be like that?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I think the opposite. I think I've always depended on the kindness of strangers, which is so interesting. I met a woman on a plane once to Miami when I was in high school, and she worked at GQ magazine, and she said, email me. I did. She ended up getting me an internship because we were like talking on the flight the whole time. And it's just like finding these, and they've all been women, by the way. And I think there was a real need in like the 90s and early 2000s to support women because outside of like going into Teen Vogue magazine early out of college, I think it was because it was mostly all women, but I met a lot of people there that were very supportive. I actually have had an incredible experience in my work life of meeting people that have followed through with saying, let me connect you. How can I help? And I want to be that person. I know a lot of people that did not at all have that experience. And I don't know if it's from growing up here and being connected to so many different people here, New York here, but I feel very lucky. And there's no way that I'm not going to pay this forward in some way. Even like, I
Yeah.
will tell you, even down to when I was at Sony, COVID happened. We then had to go back to the office. And it was a very weird thing after work. Everybody's like working for 10 plus years in an office. And all of a sudden they're like, I can't do this 5 days a week. Like, what do you mean? So we were back like 3 days a week. And then they said, you're coming back on Mondays. And it was just like the most terrible thing. And I could feel like the whole like just culture and environment shift in the office. And I'm like, okay, guys, if we have to be here, like, let's do something that like gives us some joy. So I started this thing called Food Club. And like every other week we would pick an item. And first one was fried chicken sandwiches. And we would order from 4 different places, enough for everybody who wanted to join. And then we would blind taste test everything and then rate them. And it was
Oh,
called Food
that's
Club.
fun.
So I'm like, okay, if we're going to have to be here, let's make it fun. So we did fried chicken sandwiches, we did pizza, we did chocolate chip cookies, we did everything bagels one morning. And people would be like, what, can I Venmo you? I ended up paying for the whole thing because I was like, no, this is so fun. This is so, it brought me such joy to organize it. And people would be like, hey, can I join Food Club? Like, they were like emailing, and I was like, I don't know, there's a wait list. Like, we ended up having people from like different labels coming down to join. And it just became this, like, again, it was a community thing that people love to do. It was just about like, everyone loves food. I mean, most people love food.
Yeah. It is. And it's something that is so easy to arrange. And food
Yeah.
is a way of making you stop. It
Yep.
allows you to talk to people
Yes.
that you wouldn't otherwise talk to. And then you get to like learn about someone. And then you find these similarities that you didn't even know existed. So how did that then extend into your experience with kind of bringing people together? Because you've done a lot of work with Key Change, and obviously we'll get on shortly to the Lone Wolves. But so how did that kind of transition after Sony into you showing
Sure.
up for other people?
So it's interesting. My first instinct, so I'd never been laid off, and it was 12 and a half years at a company. So these were like my family. You see these people every day. It really did become about the people at the end. And so when it happened, I obviously had like a lot of feelings, and that's why I go to therapy on Wednesday mornings. But like there was a lot of feelings happening. And do you go Wednesday morning too?
Mine is Wednesday mornings as well.
I love it. I'll think of you when I'm at therapy. Different coasts,
Thanks.
but like,
Yeah.
but no, it was really helpful. And I was thinking about like, fortunately it happened with so many people, so many of my peers, that it was not like I was the only one. We were all experiencing this. And I think the thing that I felt was most comforting, and the only thing that I felt was really good outside of, family saying like, it's okay, it happens, blah, blah, blah. But like connecting with other people that were going through exactly the same thing that I was going through. A lot of us had been there for a very long time and we're having the same experience. So that's kind of how Lone Wolves came up. I felt like we were all part of a pack, and then we all kind of got dispersed, and now we're out on our own, and we were essentially lone wolves together, which is an interesting way to think about a pack. But so I started the Slack channel to get people in and just connected, because I knew that if I was struggling, that there were going to be other people struggling. And it was really like a mental health thing. Like it started out like that. Again, having conversations with the people who were like, this is how I'm feeling. And I'm like, that's how I'm feeling. And there's just something about that commonality that creates comfort. So it started, and then it really blew up. And I know that there was a lot of layoffs that were happening around that time, but it became not really about layoffs. It became about community. And I realized once I left Sony, I'm like, holy shit, I don't know anybody outside of these walls. They make it so that it's like you're in a cult. I know that's terrible. Or like a high school. You can't talk to the other high schools. You're the best. And, we have trade secrets. The fact is there's no trade secrets. Everyone's doing the same thing. You just don't talk about your release schedule out loud, And so it was very alarming to me that I didn't have a community. And now that I'm outside of this building, I don't have a community. I've never felt like I've had a bigger community between the stuff I did at Key Change, the stuff I'm doing at Lone Wolves, the job that I took recently at Even. The fact that I am in charge of business development and I'm in charge of reaching out to companies to educate them about the platform, get agreements going. Like I already know all these people, whether it's through Lone Wolves or through, working in the industry, somebody leaves and they go to another company and then you resurface and you're like, holy shit, we worked together 10 years ago at Sony. Like that part of it has been so rewarding, and I will never put myself in a position again where I feel like I did when I was at Sony. I
Yeah,
can't.
I get that.
Listen, I'm so grateful for what I learned there and for being at a major and having that experience. I think it's really valuable, and understanding the business a little bit more from the business side. But the just being able to see the industry as a whole and really understanding what is good for artists is not in those buildings.
Yeah, when I moved here from the UK, I knew so many people in the UK music industry because the UK music industry is so much smaller in general that you go to the same events, you meet people, you just become part of this extended family. When I moved to the US, I was already running digital globally at Warner Chappell when I came over here. And so in my mind, I was here because I was doing the job, and the people I knew were the people that I needed to know. And I never prioritized building that community outside of my kind of day-to-day workings.
Yeah.
And then when I decided to leave Warner's, I never felt so alone, where I was like,
I know.
shit, I really should have prioritized building a broader network, not because I wanted some specific work outcome, but just because I wanted people to talk to. And then when I was introduced to the Lone Wolves, suddenly I was like, oh my God, there's all these people who are in the same situation that I'm in that are just craving connection, but also everybody in that group wants to help each other. And I think that's one of the things that makes the group so special is people are so free with their time and their connections. And it's so important to give back, whether that's our time, our expertise, our contacts, or if we're lucky enough to be able to bring job vacancies there as well. I think giving back into the community is what makes that community so special. And I have never once felt like there's a person in that community who isn't willing to give their time or energy to somebody else. You've built
I
something
agree.
really special, like really, really special. You should be so proud because I'm proud to be a part of it.
It's people like you that make it so special, truly, because we have almost 1,000 people right now. And I know I can name the ones that are making a really big difference. You are always there to offer support, help, connection. And it's why we do these things. But I'm going to be honest with you, like it grew itself. Like, I think it was from word of mouth, from somebody who was in there who felt good about being in there, having a friend experience a layoff and send them the link. Or, oh, you should be in here. People are talking about products, like you with the vibe coding. Like, nobody knows what that is. I mean, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the fact that you could have those conversations and talk to somebody that's in tech, it's grew itself. It's been very decentralized. We do not control a lot of it. I mean, we organize around town halls and these sessions like the one that you did, but we're not, it's been wonderful to see like these people existed. They always existed. It's just, no one ever tried to put them in one space.
Yeah. And to your point, when you work for a big corporate entity, so much of the work is keeping people apart from each other.
Yes.
And so it's actually just really refreshing to be in a space where everybody is trying to connect. Yeah, it definitely has made my life a lot more comfortable, I think, just being a part of something like that.
I'm so glad to hear that.
It's the funny thing as well for me was not just the people that I've met through it, which has been just this incredible group of people.
It's really interesting to see that when I meet people now in the industry and they say something about lone wolves. I was talking to a guy who works in mental health in the music industry, and I was like, you should join the lone wolves. He's like, I'm in the lone wolves.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you forget how big our industry is in terms of just the number of people. Like, it's kind of crazy that half of us took being laid off or quitting our jobs to come together. And I think that what you've really built in my mind is this foundation for how we stay connected going forwards. And I think one of the things for me is a commitment to myself to make sure that when I start officially this new job, that I am still showing up for the Lone Wolves, that I'm still a part of it, because it's not something in my mind that is a temporary thing. I'm part of a community now. And I think we see in the blue zones that one of the things that keeps people alive until they're like in their hundreds is remaining a part of a community.
Absolutely. I think, and somebody said, like, can I still stay in or can I still be in it? I have a job. And I'm like, no, oh my God, this is not about not having a job. Like, this isn't like a, let's be sad together. It's like again, it's really leaning into that community piece of it and saying like, this is now a place that no matter where you work next, you can come back and say, hey, I'm struggling to put together this marketing plan for emerging artists. Does anybody have ideas around this? Or do you have a contact at TikTok? We're trying to get this artist account up. All of those reasons. And it's not just asking for, it's also just like sharing experiences and hopefully like friendships too. There's something about, like you said, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to open up like that like really bonds you to good people. And there are really good people out there. There's some really shitty people out there, but there are really good people out there.
And I do think that, especially in the workplace, being like a visible leader who is willing to be inclusive and be supportive and actually lean into what the people around you want and need, I think that's how everybody should be. And I think a lot of people, it's not that they're intentionally shitty, but the way they prioritize their own motives makes them shitty. I've always made sure throughout my career that I've been seen as the person who is willing to support the people around them and lift them up. In terms of, I want to go to your relationship with Shelley briefly, if that's okay.
Of course.
You wrote the book in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Shelley is a country music singer
Mm-hmm.
who I'm going to say famously, but it might just be famously to me because A, I love country music, and B, I'm a massive gay.
Right.
So, when worlds collide. But Shelley was the first ever person in professional country music to come out. And that is a huge, huge thing to have to do. But then you met Shelley a few months after she did this. So how have you been able to kind of work alongside her in bringing her into the community that you were highlighting in writing the book, at the same time as being a supportive partner for somebody who's turned their entire life upside down in a community of people that don't appreciate or get that? How did that show up in your life day to day?
I think the thing to, highlight the most about that experience, well, first of all, I have very sort of interesting feelings about Nashville and that community. When she came out, the response was not positive. It was just silent, to be honest, silent or negative. And I think there were some bigger names that reached out privately and said, we're so proud of you and all that. But what really needed to happen was a public show of support, especially
Mhm.
in that industry, and it didn't happen. So she was in New York now. The community that in New York is very loving, very accepting, very open. Even this was 15, 20, 15 plus years ago. It was very easy to sort of fold her in. My sister's also gay, by the way, and has a wife and 2 kids. So like we're like,
Love that.
I know our entire family
Your
is straight
family did
except us.
something really right.
It took a while for my parents to think that. Yes, but now they're
Well, as
like,
long as they get there.
they were just like, we're not gonna have grandkids. I'm like, you have 4. Like, no, we're good. So it was like this weird, like most parents in 2001 would have taken the news. Yeah, so between my sister and I and being in New York and just there's such a sense of ease here that I think, is definitely getting better in Nashville. I think with it being a very small dot, blue dot in a very red state, it's still not enough. I feel like having to stay within the confines of this small space to feel safe, I can't do it. Like
Mm.
we're in a state that could very easily not recognize we're married. I had to, when Trump became president for the first time, to protect ourselves. So Shelley carried my egg. So at the time I had to basically sign away my rights as the owner of that egg. It's very antiquated. This was obviously 14 years ago. Sign it away to my own wife. So I now had no longer had rights to my own egg. So they were in her and with the donor, and she gets pregnant, has a baby. We're both on the baby in the birth certificates in New York. When Trump became president, he could have very easily said, you are not the birth parent to me because I didn't actually give birth to them, even though
Mm.
genetically they are tied to me. So we had to go through a whole process, and I was very thankful for Sony at this point where they covered the whole thing. It was technically an adoption. So I had to adopt my own children. Yeah, I had to adopt my children, legally adopt them. They covered, I know, it was about $20,000. They covered all the fees, which was
Wow.
so amazing. And it was like treated like a regular adoption. So they covered all the fees, but we had to have a caseworker come to our house and observe us as if this were a regular adoption, like we were fostering children. The whole thing went through. And my sister ended up doing the same thing. So my sister and her wife each carried a child. So they basically cross-adopted their kids to be safe. So even in states like Florida where they can, not recognize that I'm not the birth parent, now they can't. I have an adoption certificate, everything.
Mhm.
But that infuriated me so much that I had a caseworker come into our nice home to see our kids who are in a great school and fed. Like the whole thing just made me so angry. And I'm like, if we're
Yeah.
doing this in New York, one of the safest, most liberal states, I can't go anywhere else. I can't do it.
Which is fair. And I suppose as well, because of the lack of support that came out of the Nashville community, because I will say, Nashville is a community. They are, but only aligned when things kind of tick all the boxes that they need it to. I've spent a lot of time with some people in Nashville who are kind of really pivotal in highlighting the queer community there and doing what they can to really build support for the queer community in Nashville. And it sounds like a really, really tough time. And so when I first moved to the US, I was in two minds about whether or not to live in Nashville or LA because I love
Interesting.
Nashville, mainly because of my love of country music. But I knew that from a work perspective, it made more sense for me to be in LA and I could just go to Nashville. It was very, very strange feeling like I was out in
Yeah.
Nashville
Oh, that's a
because
terrible.
it was
Yeah.
I've never felt uncomfortable being out. And there were times in Nashville
Mm,
where I definitely felt uncomfortable. And it's not the queer community in Nashville. More than anything, it was the people visiting Nashville that were the ones that made me feel unsafe. But I think also, I'm not used to being surrounded by really drunk straight bros
yeah.
that are just like that as a community in its own, I felt very threatened by. And so, it's a very difficult place to feel secure. And I think I've got to the stage in my life where I'm like, I just have to feel safe and secure in my home life and with my friends, that I shouldn't feel like I have to be anything but me. Like I
Yeah.
should be allowed to authentically be myself every day of my life. And if that means I can't live in certain places, well, so be it. I just won't be in those places.
Well, you deserve that right too. We have had just so many people fight for our rights before we did that we deserve that. You deserve that. Like, you deserve to go into a space and not feel threatened. It's like it's 2026. Feels like 1920, but I think at this point, like, I feel like you and I probably both feel the regression that's happening right now a lot more than we ever have, because it's always been progress, because so much progress happened so quickly, with
Yeah.
same-sex marriage being passed, and just like this overall acceptance even from the Republican Party. They're like, we don't care, like nobody cares to put these laws. But then when you start to go backwards with immigration, with LGBT, with racism, with everything, it just starts to like feel like, oh my God, it's going to be bad again, like someone's going to die, and they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've always been a big advocate for is making sure that as communities, we talk about our history,
Yes.
because it's very frustrating to see people who understand the freedoms that they have, but they don't understand why they have the freedoms, or that those freedoms could be taken away again. And I
Yeah.
feel like across any form of civil rights in the US specifically, but kind of anywhere else in the world,
Mhm.
it is possible for things to go back. And it definitely is right now. I at least feel this is highlighting my own privilege. I know that there are certain spaces I can go to where I can code switch, because at the end of the day, I am a cis white man. Whereas, there's places that my straight female friends, I would not want them to go, because just by the nature of them being female, they're a target. Like, that to me shows the level of hypocrisy that is in our world right now, when you have people saying, we're the party of women and children, but we don't want to protect women or children. Like, that I find very, very difficult. And so talking about history and understanding where people have won these really hard fought battles, I think is important for people to understand that it's a house of cards that can collapse at any point. And I feel like, what you went through with Shelley and her coming out, like the lack of a community response highlights that. Is like, people are so scared that their own world will come crumbling down, that they're not willing to support other people who are finding their authentic self.
I will say, when Shelley did come out, I think she also felt a really big responsibility to use her platform and her public voice to represent kids across the country and across the world that didn't have that and that were scared. She says it when she talks too, like, this is for the 14-year-old in Idaho that doesn't know any gay people and is scared to come out and thinks that they're going to be disowned, or their church is telling them one thing. Like, I am here to tell you that you are worthy, you are loved, like all of those things that, because she was a kid in the Midwest in Kansas that went to a church that said that gay people are sinners and should die. Like, there's teachings that are happening that are not that far off from, this generation of people who are moving the needle. And she really did. She made it her responsibility to make sure that she represented those who weren't being represented.
I think that's so beautiful. And also it leads on to, the fact that you have these two boys, that
Yes.
you're bringing them up in a world that you're showing them that all the things that you see, all the kind of performative outrage that happens online isn't actually real. This is what's real in the world. And I just think, building a community outside of your home and showing them that being together with people is actually the strongest way to live your life, I just think is such a wonderful message to give to kids. And actually, I suppose the question for you would be, how do you feel about raising kids in this day and age with everything that you see going on online?
I mean, it's too late to go back. So we are where we are. I feel terrible about it. We have said no social media until they're 18. If you could serve in a war, you could go on
Wow.
Instagram. Absolutely not.
I mean, Instagram is a war.
It is. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. They sit with me sometimes and we look at puppy videos on Instagram, but that's very curated, because I know, right? Who doesn't? They're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, that's the cutest. But in terms of, they are very into gaming. They love Roblox. They love their Xbox, all that stuff. They sometimes watch gamers do game developing, like the back end of it. We like to if you're going to love gaming, then maybe you should learn how to build them. So we're into that. So the YouTube videos around that. But otherwise, it's like movies and stuff. They cannot be a part of this culture. They can't be a part of the bullying around it too. Like, it's this idea that your life isn't as good as the person's that you're seeing, the threats that people get. I mean, we've shut off all the chats on Roblox. Nobody can talk to them. Like, there's so many ways that pedophiles can infiltrate your children's web space. We're really diligent about that. But the social media part, like, Absolutely not. They will not have
Yeah.
social media accounts.
So I have one last question for
Sure.
you, which is the same question that I ask everybody on this show. Um, it's knowing now what you know in your life, having lived the life you have. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
It's a great question. To be accountable and to not burn any bridges. If you make a mistake, admit to it and ask somebody how you can make it better, because it creates so much more trust than trying to blame it on somebody else or pretend it didn't happen. That's something that, like, I think I tell younger people that too when they ask me that question. And because I've seen, even leaving Sony and going to this job, I did that and it makes your life a whole lot easier. You never want to be avoiding somebody, and you never want to be the person that someone else is trying to avoid at an industry event. So I think that
Yeah.
that's like my biggest, and it's hard because saying you were wrong and you fucked up is hard. And it brings up all these feelings of inadequacy. But the truth is, when you say that to somebody and then you say, what can I do to make this better? They trust you so much more.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I've always said to people is the hardest conversation is the conversation you're not willing to have,
Yes.
because you just internalize it and you make it into something it's not. And although it's difficult to start that conversation, once you start it, suddenly, like you say, the relationship you have is stronger. I really love that. I think that's a very, very strong piece of advice that everyone can learn from.
I know. I was like, this goes for adults too. Like,
Oh, 100% definitely goes for adults, because I can also assure you that before I got sober, I probably wasn't that good at it. So now, really good.
we're all a work in progress.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Lauren. This has
my
been
God.
such a fun chat.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
What I took from this conversation is how much of our resilience is actually borrowed. Borrowed from the people who check in, the people who make introductions, the people who create space for you to be honest without needing to perform strength. We talk a lot about community as a nice to have, but listening back, it's pretty clear it's closer to a survival skill. And Lauren's advice at the end really matters. Be accountable, don't burn bridges, and if you've messed something up, name it, then ask what it would take to make it right. It's simple, but it's not easy, and it changes the quality of your relationships, at work and everywhere else. If this episode landed for you, I'd love it if you could share it with one person who might need it, someone who's in a transition or rebuilding, or just feeling a bit disconnected. And wherever you're listening to the podcast, following the show makes a bigger difference than you'd think. You can also find additional content over on Instagram at 12 Steps to Success with the word 12, not the number. And if you'd like to stay more connected, head to 12stepstosuccess.com. Again, the word 12, not the number, where you can sign up for the newsletter. There's no spam, just sharing honest ideas and thoughts in line with what we discuss on the podcast. As usual, I've been Eric Mackay, and this has been 12 Steps to Success. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.